Welcome back, everyone. As promised, Chapter 2 is here. It is earlier than expected because I had the whole weekend. Please remember to subscribe if you haven't already done so. It will help me tremendously as I grow my channel so that I can keep on making more interesting chapters. We still have a lot more to cover in this isekai. Please enjoy. The residual heat from the massive fireball still tingled on Leo's fingertips, but a wave of dizziness hit him hard. He slumped against a mossy tree trunk, his breath coming in ragged gasps. With a mental command, he summoned the blue translucent status window. It hovered before him, the text glowing softly in the forest gloom. His eyes widened as he scanned the mana bar. It was dangerously depleted, flashing a warning red with only 1 MP remaining. That was too close, Leo panted, wiping sweat from his brow. If I run out completely, I might pass out. An idea sparked in his mind. In video games, passive regeneration was standard, but could he force it? He focused inward, trying to feel the pool of energy within him, and whispered the command for mana regeneration on himself. A soft, soothing blue light enveloped his body, feeling like cool water washing over a burn. He watched the status window intently as the numbers began to tick upward rapidly. "Yes!" Leo yelled, pumping his fist in the air. "Infinite mana glitch? Maybe not, but this changes everything." The adrenaline faded, replaced by the practical reality of his situation. He was alone, exposed, and night would eventually fall. "Shelter first," he muttered, surveying the dense woods. He looked down at his clothes, a sharp, modern outfit that looked wildly out of place in this fantasy forest. His hand brushed the fabric, and a pang of sadness hit him. His dad had bought this for him just last week for his birthday. "I can't let these get ruined," Leo said softly, his voice trembling slightly. "It's the only thing I have left of him." With great care, Leo stripped down to his undergarments. He folded the shirt and trousers with meticulous precision, treating them like fragile artifacts, and tucked them safely onto a high, dry rock ledge. "All right, Leo," he said, turning back to the wilderness. "Time to put that crafting skill to work." He needed a way to shape the world around him, and bare hands wouldn't cut it. Leo scoured the riverbank until he found 2 stones, one large and flat, the other jagged and heavy. He sat cross-legged on the ground, holding the stones with determination. "I need a spearhead," he stated, visualizing the shape. Clack, clack, crack. He began to chip away at the stone. It was tedious work, shards of rock flying off as he struck them together, but slowly, a crude, sharp point began to emerge. He found a sturdy stick and used long, tough vines to lash the stone point to the wood. When he held it up, it wasn't pretty, but it was a weapon. It was a tool. A smile broke across his face, a genuine, proud smile. "I actually did it," he whispered, turning the spear in his hands. "I made this on my own." Leo checked his status window again. Thanks to his earlier spell, his MP was fully restored. Energized, he marched toward a cluster of saplings. With his new spear and a surge of mana to enhance his strength, he began to down the smaller trees. He worked tirelessly, trimming the branches to create usable lumber. He laid out a square on the forest floor and began driving the framing sticks into the soft earth. Hours passed. The sun began to dip below the canopy, painting the sky in shades of orange and violet. Leo wove layers of broad, waxy leaves through the branch frame to create a roof and walls. When he finally stepped back, he was looking at a small, primitive hut. Leo wiped the dirt from his face, overjoyed. It wasn't a castle, but it was his. "That should do it for the time being while I get better tools and materials," he said, nodding in satisfaction. Growl. The sound was so loud it startled a nearby bird into flight. Leo clutched his stomach as the hunger pains finally caught up with him. "Right," he groaned. "Food. I need food immediately." He grabbed his spear and headed for the river. The water was cold as he waded in, the current tugging at his ankles. He stood perfectly still, his eyes scanning the murky depths for movement. A silver flash darted by his foot. Leo lunged, splashing wildly. He missed. He tried again, fumbling with the slippery rocks and the refraction of the water. "Come on," he gritted his teeth. He spotted a slower shadow near a submerged log. This time, he didn't hesitate. He thrust the spear down with a splash. He pulled it up, and wriggling on the end was a decent-sized river trout. "Gotcha!" he cheered, scrambling back to the shore before it could wiggle free. Back at his campsite, Leo piled up some dry twigs. He didn't need flint or matches. He pointed a finger and released a tiny, controlled burst of his fire magic. The wood crackled to life instantly. He skewered the fish and held it over the dancing flames, the smell of roasting meat making his mouth water uncontrollably. He didn't wait for it to cool perfectly. He took a hasty, steaming bite, blowing air out of his mouth to cool it down. "Oh, it's so good," Leo moaned around the mouthful of food. It was unseasoned and slightly charred, but it was the best meal he'd ever tasted. He devoured the entire fish, picking the bones clean. By the time he was finished, the forest was pitch black, the only light coming from the dying embers of his fire. Exhaustion, heavy and absolute, settled over him. Leo crawled into his hut and curled up on the pile of dried leaves he had gathered for a bed. It was scratchy and uneven, but as he closed his eyes, he felt safe. Survival day 1. Complete, he mumbled, drifting into a deep, dreamless sleep. The morning sun pierced through the canopy, dappling the forest floor in shifting patterns of gold and green. Leo woke to the sound of unfamiliar birdsong, stretching his stiff limbs as he crawled out of his makeshift shelter. The air was crisp and smelled of pine and damp earth. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the fresh air of this new world. He turned back to look at the hut, a humble structure of sticks, mud, and leaves, but to him, it was a masterpiece. He ran a hand along the rough wooden frame, a sense of profound accomplishment washing over him. He had survived the night, and he had done it with his own 2 hands. He stood there for a long moment, wandering off in his mind, imagining what this world could be and what place he might carve out for himself within it. The possibilities seemed endless, but he knew he couldn't survive on fish and sticks forever. "I need to venture more today," Leo said aloud, his voice resolute in the quiet morning. "I have to see what kind of materials I can gather. Maybe something for clothes, or better tools." Leo grabbed his stone-tipped spear, feeling the weight of the weapon ground him in reality. With a final glance at his campsite to ensure it was secure, he turned his back on the river and stepped into the denser part of the woods. The undergrowth was thick, and he had to use the butt of his spear to push aside giant ferns and hanging vines. He walked for what felt like an hour, his eyes scanning the ground for ores, unique plants, or anything the system might flag as useful. As he crested a small, moss-covered hill, Leo froze. In a small clearing ahead, rustling loudly in a thicket of bushes, was a creature. It was short, with skin the color of curdled milk and large, drooping ears. It was a goblin. Leo held his breath, gripping his spear tighter, but he didn't attack. The goblin was preoccupied, greedily snatching handfuls of bright red berries from the bush and shoving them into its mouth. It looked almost silly. It was smaller than Leo expected, its movements clumsy and focused entirely on its breakfast. "It doesn't look that dangerous," Leo thought, relaxing his shoulders slightly. "It's just eating." The moment the thought crossed his mind, a twig snapped under Leo's boot. The goblin froze. Its ears twitched, and it slowly turned its head. The creature's black bead-like eyes locked onto Leo. In a split second, the atmosphere shifted from curious to deadly. The goblin dropped the berries, its face contorting into a mask of pure malice. It bared rows of jagged yellow teeth, and a low, guttural snarl vibrated in its throat. The silly creature was gone. In its place was a monster. It let out a sharp shriek and hunched its shoulders, beginning to stalk toward Leo with a distinct, violent intent. Leo stepped back, raising his spear as he realized his mistake. In this world, nothing was harmless. The fight erupts on a dusty forest path as the goblin, armored in scavenged studded leather, charges forward with a low, predatory run that keeps his center of gravity mere inches from the root-choked soil. Leo stands his ground, gripping a spear that is little more than a jagged, sharpened stone head lashed tightly to a rugged ash branch with weathered cord. The difference in reach is immediate. As the goblin closes the gap with surprising velocity, Leo executes a frantic, wide-eyed lunge, the sheer momentum of his strike throwing up massive clouds of dry dust and brittle autumn leaves from the forest floor. The goblin quickly adapts to the lethal range of the stone tip, keeping his chest low and moving with animalistic, twitchy speed as he circles the human scout. He isn't just running, he is hunting, his manic orange eyes locked onto Leo's throat as he swings his rusted sword in horizontal arcs that whistle through the air, forcing Leo to stumble backward to avoid a disemboweling slice. The creature was faster than its awkward gait implied. It dropped low to the ground, leaning into its natural center of gravity, and whipped out a jagged, rusted blade from behind its rags. The metal hummed viciously through the air in low, tight slicing passes aimed at Leo's shins and ankles. Leo, still barefoot and feeling the shifting dirt between his toes, was forced to backpedal frantically. Every nerve was on high alert. One slip on the uneven forest floor meant losing a foot. He realized instantly that his clumsy stone spear was too slow for this close-quarters dance of death. He needed power. Grounding his feet firmly in the soil, Leo thrust his free hand forward, palm open. He closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, focusing all his willpower, all his fear and adrenaline, into that single point. Unleashing the flame. The air in front of his palm began to distort, shimmering with intense heat. Flames didn't just appear. They erupted, eroding outward from his skin like a bursting dam of raw energy. The mana drain was instantaneous and staggering. "Fireball!" Leo yelled, the roar tearing from his throat as he released the spell. A volatile sphere of screaming fire shot out, blazing a trail just inches above the tall grass, instantly turning the green blades to ash. The goblin's aggressive sneer vanished, replaced by a look of frantic terror as the miniature sun hurtled toward it. Yet, its reflexes were inhuman. In the blink of an eye, the creature dove sideways, flattening itself against the earth. The heat wave rushed over it, singeing the tips of its large ears as the fireball missed its target by mere inches. Fatigue begins to set in, and the safe distance between the combatants vanishes entirely, turning the once calculated fight into a chaotic, suffocating scramble. The goblin dives deep inside Leo's personal space, sensing the boy's strength flagging under the weight of the long encounter. They become locked in a grueling, static bind, the sword's sharp edge pressed hard against the ash spear shaft as both fighters strain every muscle for leverage. Leo's face is slick with a mixture of sweat and forest grit, his forearms trembling violently as he holds back the rusted iron meant for his heart. The goblin lunges with a snarl to pin Leo to the earth, but sparks cascade between them as the sword edge scrapes along the spear shaft with a piercing screech. The armored creature bears down with his weight, forcing Leo to exert every ounce of energy just to keep the blade from his chest. Leo moves for a final surge of desperate willpower, channeling a rhythmic force that seems to set the very air around his hand ablaze with heat. He drives a heavy, closed-fisted punch forward, even as he brings the spear shaft back for a final strike, the force staggering the goblin backward until the creature hits a tree with a sickening thud. As the goblin lunges for one last desperate parry, his heavy, labored breathing betrays his timing. Leo pivots hard on his lead foot and dives forward through the haze of battle, swinging the stone-tipped spear back into a lethal, focused horizontal alignment. With a singular, wet impact and a sharp, guttural shout of triumph and pain, Leo drives the stone tip clean into the soft, vulnerable space of the goblin's neck. The goblin's manic orange gaze turns glassy and distant as the iron sword slips from his numb fingers to clatter uselessly against the mud. The brutal force of the strike carries the goblin backward into the leaf litter until the final tension leaves his body. Leo withdraws the stone point and stumbles, his legs finally failing him as he collapses into the cool grass, leaving the clearing heavy with a sudden, absolute stillness. Thank you everyone for making it this far into the video. I hope you enjoyed Chapter 2. Please remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and like the video. Chapter 3 is in the works. Hopefully it will be released in a week. Thanks for watching, adventurers. See you again soon.